We've seen, as a result of the pandemic that, what Charles Darwin said ages ago, still holds true, right? We have to continually adapt to change to thrive and survive. And you can see that in the organizations that are doing well, even throughout this, the recent pandemic and economic slowdowns, is the ones that are agile and able to adapt. And if I think about the financial crisis, which is not actually that far back, the same thing holds true, right? There's the organizations that were able to pivot and adapt to that changing environment that did well. So being agile and being nimble is really what it's all about to survive troubled times and to in fact not just survive but actually step up your game. In June this year, I actually hosted a webinar on what separates the top performing companies from the laggards, in the COVID times, if you can call it that, right? And what we found, the value selling actually engaged with another organization and ran a survey where we interviewed over 250 senior execs in a sales and marketing position. And what we found is the ones that were doing really well versus the ones that were lagging ties back exactly to this, right? It's the ones that were adaptive to change, that aggressively invested in things like virtual communications and upskilling their organization to actually deal with that virtual environment. Organizations that actually spend money and effort in establishing a global framework for selling. And those organizations that spend 2 times more on C-level calling versus the laggards were the ones that came out to be the top performers out of that survey. So first of all, if you'd like to have access to that webinar, or you want us to send you that report, that ebook that we published on this, then please ping us a note or link me, and we'll be happy to share that with you as we go through today's presentation. So what's going on in the world? Well, why do we need access to these executives? Well, we know that when we get to these executives, it often enables us to shorten our sales cycles and to qualify sooner. So what we will be talking about is where to find them, and we'll be sharing some very specific tactics and techniques that have proven successful in gaining access. It's never a one size fits all. You wanna test and learn with these tactics as to which ones work for you. But hopefully there'll be a couple of them that will work in your favor. So one of the fundamental principles of value selling is that you can't sell to someone who can't buy, right? I mean, this is a obvious one, but the funny thing is that almost a third of sales cycles or sales opportunities in pipelines stall because we're selling to someone that actually cannot make the buying decision, right? So, and I'm sure you've all been there. You talk to someone who's really a sponsor or a coach or likes us, likes our product, likes our service, would love to test it maybe, or, install it. At the end of the day, they can't actually make the buying decision. And one of our objectives, of course, is to identify who is the person or the people that are actually in that position to make the purchasing decision and execute it. And a big chunk of what we teach in the value selling framework is actually how to do just that. So how do you deliberately uncover what is in a way, that in a way that doesn't offend the person or people that you're talking to, and actually broadens your base of communication within that organization, right? So you oftentimes get in an organization, you work your opportunity, you think you're on the right track, but as long as you're pinned down to that one individual, as we will talk about later on, there is a significant risk that opportunity is going to stall or even just die basically. So what's changed, right? Well, first and foremost, we see that on average, the decision levels have gone up, and this has been going on for a bit, but in difficult times, it's like a knee jerk, right? Immediately the decision levels move up, the budgets and the budget allocations get pushed up into the organization, and you end up having to call, at a much higher level into the organization than you did before. We often have, we'll talk about our gatekeepers, who are the ones that are kind of in between us and the C-suite. So PAs, admin, middle managers, but also, technology filters as such. And we'll talk about the buying process. The buying process has changed quite a bit, and particularly over the last 2 years, right? So that decision makers are barraged by vendors. There's nothing new. I think there's new ways that they get barraged new than maybe they were 5 years ago. Decision makers are much more sophisticated. They have much more information at their fingertips than they've ever had before in terms of what they're looking to procure. And of course, when you're at that level in an organization, you've all had a couple of burns, so to speak, situations which make you a bit more careful making a decision. Now, we also found recently in studies from McKinsey and other research organizations that there's also a shift in behavior in terms of what buyers prefer, right? They prefer, now that we've actually worked from kind of a remote base for the last 1.5, 2 years, 80% of buyers actually prefer to deal with sales interactions and salespeople that way. And in fact, almost a third are willing to spend up to $500,000 on new products or services. So not something they're reprocuring, but something that's totally new without any face-to-face involvement. So, and that reduces our opportunity as a salesperson or sales organization to actually influence their thinking, at least from a B2B direct interaction point of view. So like Darwin says, we've got to continue to adapt and up our game. And what worked in the past is probably not going to work in today's world as much. So we all know why we want to sell high, right? And if we can get to an executive decision maker early in the sales cycle, it helps us to reduce competition, shorten the sales cycle, right? I know that when I can get to an executive when they're in the strategy mode, when they're thinking about what they want to do, and I can start to actually influence their thinking and add value at that phase, they're not going to be, it's less likely, let's put it that way, that the deal is going to be highly competitive. And I can qualify them in and out much quicker. If I come to this, process at the end, if I come in at the end of the process, let's put it that way, this is almost a competitive situation. I'm almost kind of, I've almost lost before I even got going, right? And so early on is better. I also can increase my deal size typically because I can create more of a need for a more integrated solution, and I can influence their thinking in terms of what it is that they need and what we can provide to build out that solution moving forward. So there is actually plenty of reasons why we want to sell high, and these people are very busy, right? So we got to make sure that we position ourselves appropriately at those levels. But first, of course, we have to understand who we're targeting. And so if you haven't done this for a while, this is actually a great opportunity to sit down and kind of go through what is actually that a great prospect look like. What's your ideal profile, so to speak, and get really specific around it, right? So who are they? What are their roles? What industry are they in? What do they care about? And the more you can actually, pin that down, the more focused, of course, you can go after them at the end of the day. So in value selling, for me, an ideal prospect is actually someone in a sales, direct sales role in a B2B firm. Ideally, they have a sales force that is of a certain size, or they're growing at a certain pace. They have to be selling a product or service that fits our organization, which is typically something that has a value add that is maybe slightly intangible or very intangible. So software, for example, but also nowadays, product organizations that are moving from product to service are really, really good fit. If they're new in their role or there's some change going on in their organization, that's a tick in the box for me, because that means that they're probably looking outside to get some support. And I'm kind of building out that profile, locations, etc. for me as much as I can, because that helps me focus on what is the what's the target audience that I'm most likely to get traction with. We also talk about thinking what is on the mind of those individuals, right? What are their business issues? What are those organizations facing? For those that are in sales, it's often not very difficult to figure out, right? They're responsible for delivering their revenue and margin. And as such, typically sales leaders will be responsible for forecasting, and they have to show that they demonstrate that they understand and have command of the pipeline, if you will. And those things are often problematic, right? And again, this is value selling, me selling value selling, but try and relate that into your own world. And what are the things that when you figured out the profile of your ideal kind of prospect, what are the things that are working in their industry, that are working in that typical kind of business that is high on their mind? And you will find that if you think about that higher level business issue, it typically helps you to focus on, okay, what are the things that these people care about? And that's important because we want to get into the business issues and the problems, which are the things that are high on their mind. So once we understand who we're targeting, we can start to think about what our plan is to get access to those individuals, right? So we're going to talk about 4 different ways to gain access, and all of these we will cover. We also cover in our typical value selling programs. We actually have a very intense program on filling the funnel and prospecting that dives quite deep into this, as you can imagine. So first and foremost, who do you know? Who knows them, right? So can I get a referral? So so it's not a cold start, right? Anytime you can get introduced, that I can get introduced to power by someone that's in a person, that someone respects, I know it's going to be an easier introduction. So knowing who knows them is quite important. And LinkedIn, of course, is a great way to find out those connections. You can go in and look at, for example, ex-colleagues that have moved shop and are now working in a different organization. Who's running sales there? And can you give me some background, or better still, can you introduce me? Same with customers, right? I ask all of my customers constantly, look, it's great working with you. Who else do you think would be interested in applying value selling services and would benefit from our approach in increasing their revenue stream and upping their margins? And typically you will get 1 or 2 names out of that. Now, names are great. What's even better, of course, is introductions, right? And then social networking, right? I know that's, some people use Facebook business. They have ways to identify and get referred to some of those target executives. But ideally, what you want is a warm referral, someone who will actually send an introduction. And in my world, if I know someone, that I respect and sends me an email introducing me to someone, says something like, Bart, I really think you should talk to this individual, or you should, you could benefit from meeting them. It's very seldom that I will not take that opportunity and actually have that conversation. And that's because you respect that individual that sends you, takes the effort to actually send you that referral. And of course, at the end of the day, you also want to make sure that you get back to them in terms of being respectful in thanking them for making those introductions, right? So there's actually a couple of things that you want to be wary of, or be very sharp on with referrals. Is one, if someone introduces you, that there's a time value to it. So make sure that there's some urgency and immediacy around how you follow up on that. And number 2, regardless of the outcome, you want to thank the person because they're taking a risk by introducing you into their circle of influence, right? And thank them. And this doesn't have to be anything big, but just make sure that you do it, right? I mean, I've seen lots of cases where you get the referral or you refer someone through and you never hear about it again and again. Then the next time that you ask for some help, you will probably not get it because you haven't actually been respectful of that of the effort that that individual has taken to introduce you, right? So make sure that that's something that you approach with urgency and with respect, because they are going out on a limb to actually get you introduced to that senior level individual. So let's move into the gatekeeper strategy, right? So there's a couple of different types of gatekeepers that we identify, right? The first one, I would say, is the administrative gatekeeper, and quite frankly, I've known those gatekeepers to be my best friend, right? If you treat them with respect and ask for help, you get to an admin person or a personal assistant. You need to understand their job is to protect and qualify, who tries to get in the door, right? They're kind of like the barrier between you and those executives that they support and care for. And apart from the fact that they have tremendous insight into what is top of mind for those individuals, they also know them oftentimes quite well on a private level, right? So treat them with respect and ask for help, because you're going to run into them left, one way or the other, left, right, or center, was going to say. But that's kind of the big takeaway here. Now, my experience is that when I ask for help in these kind of situations, I might say something like, look, I'm Bart, Value Selling. We help organizations with improving sales productivity. Now, under what circumstance or, under what situation would your chief sales officer be willing to take a meeting? What kind of information might he or she be interested in? So I'm basically asking them for help right from the get-go, right? And a couple of years ago, I did, I did just that. I'd done my research. I've sent out, an email introduction with some nice content. I called, the week after I started calling. I got this personal assistant on the phone, and she actually asked me, look, let me help you make sure that that you get to the right person. So I told her why I was calling. And that I'd sent this email earlier, and what I'd like to talk to them about. And she put me on hold and gave me maybe 30 or 45 seconds, and came back and transferred me to another person, which I didn't know. And they actually, turns out that this guy that I spoke to was the right-hand man of the person that I was trying to get to. And they just this morning been discussing, what they needed to do in terms of their sales kickoff for next year, and what kind of help and support they will be looking to gain. Now, that PA had been in that same meeting. I mean, she's probably the one that's going to have to organize the whole thing at the end of the day. So we got through, I got through, not by tricking her or, playing any games, but just basically being very transparent and asking her on terms of what is it that is required and what is top of mind with these executives. So we really want to turn them into a bridge and not a gate, right? And last point here on voicemail, with administrators or personal assistants, they're terribly busy. If they don't know you, nothing will happen. So I think there is a bit of perseverance is required to just try and get to them in person. And if that doesn't work, then, try some other route into the organization. But voicemail is typically not the way to go. So let's talk about the middle manager gatekeeper, right? So these are a little different and also, very well known on the track. The concept is pretty much the same. How do we partner with them? How do we understand what's most important to them? In my experience, they take on a couple of different kinds of guises, if you will. There's those people that are really interested in actually having the information in the relationship with suppliers, because that gives them some certain amount of power, right? They like to be better informed, and they like to hold on to that information so they can leverage that off into their organization, right? Then there are people that are really kind of not very much attached to the rest of the organization, to just doing their own thing. And and you can get really stuck, with those kinds of middle managers if you don't try and broaden your scope or broaden your horizon, broaden your number of contacts, I should say, within that organization, right? So one of the techniques that we really kind of focus on here is to bargain with them, right? Because you, as a salesperson, you might not think you do, but you hold power, right? You have information that they want, right? When they've been sent out, let's say, for example, to procure a new ERP system, they will be looking for, based on their list of requirements for certain kind of software and certain applications out there that will fit really well with it. They also want to have a lot of best practices. They want to have probably demos. They want to have some kind of insight, and you can trade that off in terms of bargaining with them and getting additional access into that organization. Another strategy that we often use is modus operandi, right? Where the middle manager calls me and says, we're exploring this, and can you help, right? And the answer is, of course. I also want to then set the expectation that once we move forward, we want to go and get the key stakeholders and decision makers in the conversation as well. So you can actually use those moments, those pivotal moments in that conversation, once you've got like an anchor, to build that access into your sales cycle. Now, there's always the question of, should you go around? And I think that depends. I don't believe in, being too, how do you say it, gentle there. I know a lot of people hate it, but if you've tried a couple of times, you can't really get any further. Again, I had a recent experience where I got stuck into a situation with a really, really nice guy. He was very helpful, always kind of giving me the inkling and the idea that we were actually moving in the right direction. But after a couple of weeks, I decided to go straight to the CEO and put the question to him. And of course, there's a risk, but at the end of the day, the biggest risk is they say no, and I wasn't getting anywhere anyway, right? So you have to make the call. It's going to be different from situation to situation, but I would definitely advise against waiting too long or letting things progress too long, right? When you feel that you're actually in an organization, you're really only banking on one person, and you've been in that conversation for, say, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, that's not a good sign, right? So, because if the project is big enough and if it's important, you should get introduced to more people, and they should be interested in introducing you to more people that are part of that DMU to move that opportunity forward. So just, be wary of that, I would say. And then the last one is technology, right? So how do we get through all the filters, that people, people get flustered by, I would say, right? So one of the things that we talk about with our clients is having kind of like orchestrated communication to the target people that you're trying to gain access to. So we actually have some recorded webinars specifically on just this topic, which you can find on our on the value selling website. And we will give you some bit more guidance in terms of which ones those are a little bit later on. But until you actually meet with someone, you don't really know what their preferred mode of communication is, right? So what we've found is if you go at them from all modes of communication, typically one or two of them will actually work. So we will use email, we do pick up the phone, and of course we use social media, right? And the phone, I think, particularly also in this day and age, is a very, very powerful tool to access people. And sending, even sending like a normal letter in the mail, can actually get people's attention up, right? It's much more maybe of a challenge with the work at home environment today. And of course, it's more work, right, in terms of actually doing that. But if you think about it, you might get, 2 or 3 pieces in the actual post today. And and most of those are bills, right? So if you can actually if you actually get some mail from someone who's, who's reaching out to you to to help you with some of the challenges that you face, that might actually, get them to think, and at least we'll get their attention, right? And now the other thing that I use quite a bit, and we use quite a bit, of course, is WhatsApp or SMS, some kind of text message. And I find that when you get, when you get through that cycle, and you've sent your email, and you've maybe, send another follow-up mail, etc., that sending a WhatsApp message or an SMS actually works quite well, and saying, look, I've sent you an email, I don't know, yesterday or, earlier this morning. I just want to check whether or not that actually, reached you or it's fallen in, for example, your junk folder, which happens quite a lot, right? And I can't count the number of times when I thought that I was, doing a great job, approaching, tons of people, and then finding out that actually a lot of them never even saw my email because it didn't really get through. So using a combination, as we call it, in an orchestrated way, is one of the things that works really well. And then maybe last, before we do a quick break, when you use LinkedIn, which I'm sure you all do, try shoot a short video, right? I mean, it's quite interesting that when you blog or when you send kind of like, or resend information from your company outside, typically the uptake is relatively limited. Now, when you actually shoot a short video, and it has, it can be 15 seconds, right? Or maybe 30 seconds, or my experience is that your click rate and the responses that you get go up 20 or 50 times. So that's a real thing to kind of try and think about when you build your profile and get some exposure out there. So Julie, let's take a quick pause before we go into the next bit.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, let's do that. Well, first of all, there's some great tips. Thank you. And, one of the questions I think you mentioned earlier, Bart, was about referrals.
Yep.
So when is a good time kind of to ask for referrals? Like if the account is transitioned, to other services teams, like what would be some good times to do that?
Well, I don't think there's a bad time to call for a referral, right? It just depends on who you're asking it to and what their relation is to the person that you're targeting. Now, I would say that if that person in the C-suite that you're targeting has moved, say, 12 or 18 months ago, that's probably an even better time. It is definitely better timing for me, for example, from a value selling point of view, because they will be more open to look at outside help than if they've been there for 6, 7, 8 years and they've kind of figured out how to run their business. So from that point of view, yes, I think looking at getting a referral in when that person is relatively new in their role, or when the organization is going through quite some change, right? You see these organizations go through cycles all the time. In our case, when organizations are actually growing very fast, it's a good time to get a referral. But similarly, when they're actually stalling or when business is actually not as good, is also a good time, because what we do in value selling, of course, is help organizations to up their game from a B2B sales point of view.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good stuff. And so here's another question. Maybe one more, and then we'll get moving again. Sure. Does a C-suite executive usually want to interact with the person at their actual level?
No, it's a great question. And I would say it depends, right? It really depends on whether or not you can actually have a value-driven conversation. And it's a great primer for what we're going through in the second half of this webinar, because we will touch on that quite a bit. But I would say, most executives that I know, they will have a preference, because they know that when they speak to a peer at the same level, that, they can talk shop, right? At the same point, if they can talk to someone who gives them bright insights, new ideas, fresh, inspirational, maybe even suggestions, then that is also very well received. So there is definitely not, so I would put it this way. You can talk to anybody you want to. You just have to make sure that you're prepared to engage with them on their level.
Yeah, sounds good. So we'll keep moving forward and keep putting your questions in the Q&A box. And here towards the end of our presentation, our webinar today, some tips that Bart's sharing with us, we're going to circle back and answer as many questions as we can. Okay, Bart, back to you.
Thanks, Julie. So we talked a bit about bargaining, and bargaining is something that we do throughout the sales cycle, right? So there are lots of things that people want from us whilst we're managing through a sales opportunity. And if we don't have the executive level that we believe is critical engaged, maybe, that we've even validated is critical for us to win, then we have to trade something that they want from us to get to that individual. So like I said earlier, if they want a demo, sure. If they want a reference, or they want some more data or material, those are all pivotal points where you can say, yeah, I'm happy to do that. By the way, can we get to such and such person? Because at the end of the day, they will need to make the call, and therefore it'd be good to engage with them at some stage, right? And actually, back to the question, Julie, you just asked, the other technique that I'm actually a really big fan of is top to top. So I think the question that you asked was around, if I'm not at the same level as this exec, would they want to talk to me, right? So the top to top is actually a technique that allows you to, well, basically put you in a position to introduce your C-level exec to their C-level exec. And I've done this very, very often and myself, because it makes one, I got really great return out of it, to be honest, right? So yeah, I would say every time that I actually used our CMO or our CFO or our CEO, even in previous companies, to level up to the companies that I was calling on, they would be open to have that conversation. And even if we can't get it fixed, you would still then have the opening, right? Now, there is always the challenge of timing, right? So if you, like I typically used to do, if you call in and say, look, our CFO is in town, 2 weeks from now, would be great to, have them meet with your CFO and, talk about, developments and strategy, then the chance, of course, is always that the timing won't work out, right? And particularly with these people, sometimes you have to plan these things months in advance. Now, given that everybody is now so used to virtual meetings and doing things remote, I think the opportunity is even greater to leverage that top to top technique, right? So you can actually go in and talk and ask any of your C-level execs in the company if they'd be willing to spend some time with some of your prospects. And I will tell you now that the answer will undoubtedly be yes, because it's lonely at the top, right? So these people, they're working very hard, but they don't get exposure to customers oftentimes. And so if you actually reach out to them and offer them that opportunity, one, that will be good for you because they'll like you even more. And two, it will get you probably much quicker access to that individual than you would otherwise struggle to get to. So I would recommend that one in particular. And then the last component is really our proactive outreach approach, right? We call this the AIM campaign. And this is really about thinking through what might motivate them, what might trigger them, what might entice them to accept a meeting from me, right? And many of these people are barraged by emails all day. Well, most of those emails are about the person reaching out to them, what they represent. Let me tell you about this great product. Let me tell you about me. Let me tell you about this company. And sadly, a lot of it is about them in the messaging. And of course, the most effective messages are the ones that actually start to resonate with the executive because they play on what they care about, right? So in my previous life as a sales leader, I expected anybody who wants time on my calendar or, to have time in my office to actually show me that they know what I care about and what's on my mind, right? And so we will talk about these AIM campaigns, where AIM stands for anxiety, influence, and motivation. And just think through what you can include. What can I include in this communication that's about them? What demonstrates that I know them? And therefore, when I ask for their time in exchange for some potential value that I might bring, they will actually trigger on that, right? And there's some of the ideas here, some suggestions on the things that you can look into in types of that communication and how you orchestrate it, so that when you do that outreach, you'll have bigger chance of success, right? So in terms of anxiety, if you want to build some level of anxiety, you can talk about performance problems. You can talk about their peers, superiors, competition. In terms of influence, you can touch base on, again, competition, but also the market leaders and what they're doing and their track record. And then to motivate them to act, you really want to talk about where you have solved or your organization has solved similar problems elsewhere, right? And what measurable success you've actually managed to achieve. And so, as I said earlier, we spent 2 days, full classrooms on this topic to train teams on getting better at that. But I think this should give you some really good ideas and suggest and hopefully steer you in the right direction of how to execute against it. The core, how do you know what might be important to them, right? How do you know what problems they might have? And how do you know what potential value you could actually bring to them? So you have to do a little research. You have to know your customer, right? And starting with a value statement or an outcome that ties to their business issue or bottom line is a really great way to nail that initial meeting, to get them to pay attention, right? And one of the mistakes that we often see is that initial call is all about the product and them and their organization, and then you burn your chances of getting that next meeting or getting that follow-up opportunity. So think about it as you're being the chief value officer. I know it sounds a little cheesy, but if you engage with those individuals as, look, I'm here to bring you value, not to push my stuff, and what is it that I can actually put on the table that will be of value to you, that will set me apart, and that will entice you to kind of continue the conversation, then I think you've got it nailed. So the reality is, if you're going to add value, you need to engage, right? And not pitch, and gain their interest. So ask the right questions, and don't be focused on the product or the service. That's really going to be a turn off. This slide says it, right? So you want to do all those things, and you don't want to do the other things that we oftentimes fall into that trap of doing, right? So pausing, pausing after asking a question, really ask good, open, probing, and confirmed questions, and actually use that time that you have. A study from Gong.io recently showed that you have, with a senior level executive, you maybe have 6 or 7 questions that you can put in, and then time's up, right? So think about those and make sure that you ask those questions that will give you the information so you can progress that opportunity moving forward. So here's an example of this, of an AIM letter, as we call it, right? And this was actually used by one of my colleagues a couple of years ago. And I think this is an excellent example of what she used to get in the door and get an appointment, right? So let's go through it, right? So the first paragraph is interesting, right? So she actually sends an email to 3 individuals. They're all peers, and she's going after all of them because oftentimes there's healthy competition between these two. And getting to know what everybody was on the same page is important, but also if one of them won't engage, maybe the other one will. And thirdly, yeah, if you reach out to multiple people in an organization, that also shows confidence in the fact that you're not afraid to actually, move around in that organization and to gain access, right? So she talks, then next thing she talks about, some of the things that we do, drop some of the clients that we work with, which, builds a little bit of influence to establish some credibility. And then she asked for a meeting when she went into a really short description of why to meet, right? Now, some of the problems that we solve now in our business, we're not only selling a methodology, we're selling ourselves as a change agent, as I said at the beginning, right? So she also included a little bit about herself, but not much. She got a real nice response back from 3 of the 4 individuals, which did result in a meeting and eventually in an opportunity. So she had to do the research. She had to know those people were, and she had to know what potential value she could bring to them. But it did allow her, as such, to really build that credibility, and having that, having that in place, and work with multiple individuals at the same time will give you some more leverage in terms of actually moving things forward. So she said, I wanted them to think about our solution is the best before I understand what problems they actually might have. So it's really talking about orchestrating this and putting these letters through to your customers in such a way that they actually get a series of messages over multiple channels, so that once we get to once this topic gets on their agenda, we will be top of mind, and they will be thinking about us rather than the competition, right? So it's really important to have those components in place, and as we call it, think about your sphere of engagement. Who are the people that you can actually influence, and what types of communications can you use, and by using those, add value to them. And once you do that, and if you're interested in that, again, there's another webinar on this topic that will actually give you a bit more insight on that orchestrated communication to your sphere of engagement. So the bottom line is basically that people want to work with people that understand their problems and have ideas on how they can help, right? Again, back to the question in the break. This is actually the moment that you have some inkling of an idea of how you can actually provide value and support. That's when you have an opening to actually engage with that C-level. And you will see that the value selling framework will require you to do some proper preparation, to understand their business, ask questions, in order to collaborate on developing the best solutions. But along the way, we'll continuously confirm, right, that we actually share this mutual understanding with the buyer, whether that is about their industry, their problems, their uniqueness, or their business objectives. We want to solve their problems, and we definitely do not want to push. So let me wrap it up. I think we were going to go for 40 to 50 minutes, so we're about there. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have in a minute. So in terms of wrap up, as successful sales reps, we have to be business savvy business people, right? We have to build that acumen, and we have to invest in it. It's a skill, but it's also a knowledge base. And if you want to be successful as selling to an executive, then you have to be able to present yourself as an executive and have to be able to have that peer-to-peer conversation, right? We talked about a couple of different tactics. Number 1, leveraging introductions. Go for it. It's a fantastic way. Mind those, use your resources, and really understand, where those introductions might come from. Be thankful, be respectful, and move them with some immediacy and urgency, because there's value there. You need to have a gatekeeper strategy, right? So they're always going to be there. We can't avoid them. You have to have a plan in terms of how you can turn that gatekeeper into a bridge, and how you can partner with them. which again will be through adding value to that individual. We talked about modus operandi and setting the foundation. Only when you are there with a gatekeeper that we need to get other business stakeholders involved so that, we can be successful. And sometimes, yeah, that means when the answer is no, then it's not worth it to spend your time on it. And you can, you need to move on. And that's fine. So we talked a little bit about bargaining. We talked to, the last thing that we talked about was really this orchestrated campaign and aim campaign, basically with a written purposeful approach that taps into anxiety, influence, and motivation. And then, I will just say again, this top to top approach in terms of connecting C-level to C-level, again, is another great way to get your access sorted.